Hello everyone, my name is Jim DeBurrow. I'm a Seabrook resident and member of Seabrook's Budget Committee. I put together a few slides here to explore some concerns we have currently with the unusually high expenditures of both Seabrook's town budget and more specifically the fire department budget here in Seabrook. This next slide is a simple bar graph of various towns in southern New Hampshire that have similar populations to Seabrook, New Hampshire, and their relative operating budgets in comparison to Seabrook. As you can see on the far left, Sandown with a budget of about $6 million per year, Nottingham 6, Auburn 6.6, Atkinson 7.2, Stratham 8.8, Epping 9.8, and Epping's interesting because Epping is almost the exact same size as you can see Seabrook is, population-wise of 8,200 people, almost 8,300. Raymond, New Hampshire, greater population, 10,700 or so. Their budget's $9.8 million. Kingston, a little smaller, population-wise, budget of 9.9, almost $10 million. Newmarket, New Hampshire, slightly bigger than Seabrook, budget of $10.7 million. Hampstead, New Hampshire, with a population slightly larger than Seabrook of 9,000 or so people, and the budget's $12.1 million. Plastow, just under 8,000 people, $13.3 million. Rye, New Hampshire, a very wealthy community on the seacoast, with a budget of $13,300,000 and a slightly smaller population, 5,543. And then we have Seabrook. Seabrook's budget for a town of 8,401 personnel is $26.5 million in 2025. Literally twice the next nearest town in this comparison market. So this is a busy slide. Let me walk you through this, if I can, in terms of what I'm trying to portray here on this slide. What I tried to do here is to show a comparative analysis of 20 similar towns or adjacent towns to Seabrook, New Hampshire, and highlighted in red ones that are similar in size in terms of populations. So I've compared a number of factors here, looking at populations, the land area of the towns, the overall fire department budget per town, and then did some math to look at how much spending we're doing per capita and per firefighter. Also looked at how many firehouses we have, and a very important metric in terms of how many calls or dispatches per year are happening in each one of these towns, and the type of fire department that these towns employ. There are a number of different kind of models of fire departments, ranging from full-time professional fire departments, where you have dedicated, salaried or hourly paid firefighters, to volunteer or on-call fire departments, or hybrids called combo fire departments and on-call. Seabrook, in this case, is a full-time professional department, and I don't mean to disparage any other department by saying they're professional. All firefighters are professionals, but in this case, it's a full-time dedicated fire department. One thing that I should point out too, if you look at other communities of our size, Seabrook, about 8,400 population, we are the smallest population by far with a full-time fire department. So looking at this chart, I sorted it high to low in terms of average dollars spent per firefighter. And how I arrived at that, I took the overall budget in the column, I guess the fourth column from the left, fire department budget, and divided it by the number of firefighters in the column, 3 columns to the right, and arrived at an average spending per firefighter. As you can see, Seabrook is significantly higher than any comparable community, including communities that have much larger populations and much larger land areas like Portsmouth, Salem, New Hampshire, and Hampton, New Hampshire. Hampton, New Hampshire is an interesting one because they are very similar to Seabrook in terms of their configuration, having a coastal village, if you will, on waterfront, and having a large commercial district as well as a non-beachfront residential district. One thing you'll note is that Hampton's population is roughly twice that of Seabrook's, but their budget overall for fire department is actually lower than Seabrook's at $5.8 million per year compared to Seabrook's $6.5 now million per year. Another thing to point out in this chart is that many of the communities in the local area, similar size to ours, are volunteer on-call firefighter departments or combination full-time on-call departments. When I say combination full-time, it means there are a small number of dedicated, full-time firefighters that are supplemented as needed by people on call. Forgive the pun, but it's appropriate in this setting to say, where there's smoke, there's fire. The real question that behind the unusually high number of calls or dispatches in Seabrook as compared to other communities is whether these dispatch numbers and the associated overtime expenditures are proportional to similar towns. Are they even accurate? Are they warranted? And when I say warranted, there's been some reports of the fire department giving courtesy rides to people in the community, neighbors, friends, relatives, whoever, to things like doctor's appointments or transports back and forth from hospitals, other procedures that would then necessitate a backfill to the firehouse of firefighters driving up the overtime number. The hypothesis that is being posed here is that we have a disproportionately high number of calls driving a disproportionately high number of overtime pay, whether it's intentional or as a result of a policy decision by the fire chief and select board. We have to explore why those numbers are as high as they are. So drilling down on one specific hot button issue as it relates to the town of Seabrook and specifically the fire department is a warrant article that has been recurring year after year after year here in Seabrook for promoting the possibility of adding 40% more headcount to the existing fire department of 20 firefighters. So the proposal has been to add 8 new firefighters every year since 2023 through warrant articles. And as you can note, in 2023, they portrayed that cost at 30 cents per thousand of home value. This was rejected by the Seabrook voters. In 2024, they sharpened their pencils, on paper anyway, and projected the cost at 28 cents per thousand of home value. Once again, Seabrook voters said no. Seems like an awful lot of money for a budget we're spending $6+ million for already. Last year, 2025, once again, the fire chief, with the support of the select board and the town manager, published a warrant article with a alleged tax impact of, again, reduced 24 cents per thousand of home value. And yet again, Seabrook voters saw through that and said, no, we're not going to spend that kind of money to increase an already expensive fire department. So what was the big plan this year? Wait for it. 2026, the proposed warrant article, for the exact same purpose of adding 8 more firefighters, they're alleging the tax impact is less than 4 cents per $1,000 of home value. The actual number is 3.5 cents, folks. Really? Do the town leadership think that they're fooling us? What's really happening here is the way they have structured the verbiage of the warrant article is highly deceiving to the taxpayers and voters of Seabrook. Specifically, what the warrant article suggests doing is hiring 4 firefighters in calendar year 2026 at the very end of calendar 2026, and the additional 4 in 2027. So this 3.5 cent, 4 cent impact to the tax base is based on having just 4 new firefighters for a very small portion of calendar year 2026. That's how they arrive at cutting the actual cost by at least 88%, which is very deceiving because when those 4 firefighters are on full time in 2027, and we add the next 4 firefighters in 2027, the cost to the taxpayers in the subsequent years is at least 30 cents per thousand. My estimate so far, best case scenario will be 28 cents per thousand, but more likely the cost is $35 per thousand for adding 8 new firefighters to the current headcount. And that's taking into consideration, people, that the overtime that we're spending right now would be reduced potentially somewhat by having additional resources, full-time resources on the department. So this impact takes into account the fact that we will have, we hope anyway, a reduced amount of overtime in the budget. Today, the Seabrook budget of $6.4 million includes $1.5 million of overtime expense. So what does that impact mean to your bottom line tax bill if you're a Seabrook resident and homeowner? Again, the range of 28 cents to 35 cents per thousand means if you're an average homeowner, the house is worth $600,000 at assessed value, you'll be charged between $168 to $210 additional per year just for this tax warrant article. If you are a beach homeowner, and most of those homes are assessed, many above $2 million, but I put an average assessment of $2 million here, your increase just for this warrant article ranges from $560 to $700 increase per year. Now, to be clear, this does not count tax increases from other warrant articles and our perennial baseline tax increases that are driven very heavily by fire department spending, healthcare costs, and other contractual obligations for increased spending year after year. So the message of the slide is you would think that the fire chief and town leadership think that the Seabrook voters are stupid. They think that we're going to believe that it would take only 4 cents per thousand impact to hire 8 new firefighters, when in reality it's at least 30 cents per $1,000 of impact. The message, let's prove them wrong. Vote no on warrant article number 25, this upcoming election on March 10th. This last slide is meant to summarize the points I've already made. The biggest point being we have exceptionally high spending in relative terms to other similar towns in our region, both in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Our overall spending, and particularly the fire department spending, are significantly higher. Not 5%, not 10%, 100% higher in many cases than comparable towns. Complicating matters is we have a revenue opportunity in the fire department for receiving reimbursement for EMS and medical transport calls that we're not taking good advantage of. Allegedly, 2/3 of our calls, of about 4,200 calls per year, are related to medical or EMS transport activity. Our receipts, though, for those calls are far lower than would be expected for that number of transports due to a number of issues, some of it being policy driven, some of it being maybe a administration issue. Regardless, communities with far fewer calls than Seabrook are generating far more revenue that defrays the cost of operating a fire department. In our case, the funds that we do receive, even though they're not up to snuff, are kept in a revolving account and are not used to defray the fire department budget year over year. Last but not least, we have an issue getting clear and comprehensive data on budget items related to the fire department. For example, the actual number of fire calls by category, we have had difficulty getting a straight number on that for a number of years now in my involvement on the budget committee. We're hoping to have that addressed this year, finally.
The actual expected cost of adding incremental firefighters has been perennially lowballed to try and convince the voters to sign up for those 8 firefighters. And this year is a dramatic example of that deception and disingenuousness in how the warrant article number 25 was written. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. My recommendation as a Seabrook voter, Seabrook citizen, and member of the Seabrook Budget Committee is that you not vote to support the warrant article number 25 or any other warrant article that you think drives excessive spending for the town of Seabrook. We must do a better job in selecting our leadership and having those leadership take their fiduciary responsibility seriously in monitoring our budget and minimizing our spending. Thank you very much.